I still remember that day as if it were etched into my memory. It was a typical Wednesday evening, the kind that doesn't seem significant until something extraordinary happens. I had settled into my favorite spot on the couch, snug and cozy, with the flickering light from the television casting a warm, comforting glow over the dimly lit living room. The sound of the TV filled the space with a sense of familiarity, and I was halfway through a crime documentary, completely engrossed in the terrifying tales that unfolded on the screen. The stories recounted the chilling reality of lives disrupted by sinister forces, but just as I was getting comfortable, I felt an unsettling sensation creeping up my spine. It was that gnawing instinct, the kind that you might dismiss as mere paranoia, but at that moment, I couldn't simply brush it off. I glanced out the window, and my heart dropped into my stomach. There he was, a man. Dressed entirely in dark clothes, he stood perfectly still in the shadows of the tall oak tree that lined our yard. His gaze was fixed on me, a piercing intensity that sent shivers coursing down my spine, making every hair on my body stand on end. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat, an icy claw of fear gripping my chest. What was he doing there? Why was he staring at me? Desperate to ignore the building anxiety, I quickly turned my focus back to the TV, trying to convince myself that I was just overreacting. Maybe he was merely passing by, a figment of my overactive imagination. I didn't want to scare my mother, who was in the kitchen preparing dinner, blissfully unaware of the looming threat outside. However, as the moments dragged on, the unsettling feeling grew more powerful, and soon, the urge to alert her became overpowering. I got up and walked cautiously to the kitchen, conscious of my steps as I tried to maintain a casual demeanor, masking my growing dread with a brave face. "Mom, do you mind checking something for me?" I asked, my voice wavering slightly despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "What is it, sweetie?" she replied, glancing briefly from the stove, her brow furrowing with concern. "There's a man outside. I think he's been staring at me." Her expression shifted almost immediately from calm to worried. She set down the spatula with a measured urgency and glided over to the window, peering cautiously through the blinds as if she could shield herself from the reality that lay beyond the glass. I could see her frown deepen as she glanced back at me, her face a mask of concern etched with fear. "Stay here," she whispered urgently, her eyes wide. "I'm going to call the police." I watched her, heart racing faster than before, as she stepped into our small hallway and picked up the phone. My mind swirled with a cacophony of thoughts, my eyes darting back to the window repeatedly. The man was still out there, though now he stood slightly closer, his features obscured by the shadows, making him seem even more ominous. Frantically, I closed the curtains, hoping to shield my eyes from the sight that was gnawing at my sanity. But it did little to quell my anxiety. Time seemed to distort and stretch into an eternity as I waited impatiently for my mother to return. "Mom!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the silence, panic surging within me as I realized how long she had been gone. Just as I was about to get up and check for her, I heard a loud banging noise reverberate through the front door. It echoed through our home, sending a chill coursing through my veins that made my blood run cold. I dashed towards the hallway, where my mother was now pacing, looking into the peephole with a terrified expression. "The police are on their way," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But we need to stay quiet." The banging grew louder, more aggressive. Each impact was like a drumbeat, my heart pounding in my ears as we crouched down behind the sofa, our breaths held tight. The muffled sounds of the man's voice drifted through the door, angry and threatening, a chilling reminder of the vulnerability that had invaded our sanctuary. I could hear him demanding to be let in, insisting that he just wanted to talk, his voice slicing through the tension like a knife. Minutes felt like hours, agony stretching on until we finally heard the sirens outside, a promise of safety that seemed both far and near. The man seemed to lose interest at the sound, and the banging stopped momentarily as we exchanged fearful glances, our unspoken fears reflected in our wide eyes. Suddenly, there was a loud crash against the door, followed by an urgent voice shouting, "Open up! I know you're in there." Moments later, the police arrived, 3 officers bursting into our home with a sense of authority. They managed to apprehend the man who had fled, but not without a brief chase that left us unnerved. When everything settled, a lingering sense of fear clung to the air, an unshakable weight that threatened to suffocate us. The stark realization of our vulnerability sank in deeper than the incident itself. It was a terrifying reminder that danger could lurk beyond our cozy walls, hiding in the shadows where we least expected it. In the wake of that frightening experience, another chilling story emerged from my travels. I found myself on a solo trip to Mexico, eager to explore the vibrant streets and immerse myself in the rich culture and history of the place. I wandered through bustling markets, marveling at the colorful handicrafts and inhaling the fragrant spices that filled the air. But one evening, as I made my way back to the hotel after a long day of exploration, I noticed an unsettling figure trailing behind me. At first, I thought it might just be a coincidence, a random passerby, but as I turned down one alley after another, I began to realize he was still there, a man, his posture menacing, with a jarring smirk that set icy chills down my spine. Driven by a sudden surge of fear, I quickened my pace, my heart racing with every step as I tried to outdistance him. I could hear his footsteps echoing behind me, each one a stark reminder of the danger that lurked in the dark. My mind raced with frantic thoughts of escape, but my legs felt heavy, as if the ground beneath me was pulling me down into an inescapable pit of fear. Finally, I spotted a well-lit cafe and dashed inside, nearly crashing into a group of startled tourists. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced behind me, spotting him standing outside, scanning the crowd with predatory intensity, looking for me. My breath quickened, adrenaline surging through my veins as I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call my mother back home for reassurance. Trembling, I settled at a corner table, my eyes glued to the door as the hours crept by, unable to shake the unsettling feeling of being hunted. My safe haven then felt like a prison, the walls closing in around me, suffocating my rational thoughts. As the crowd in the cafe began to thin, the terror resurfaced, gnawing at my insides. I finally made the hard decision to leave, but opted for the bus station instead of heading directly back to my hotel. The bus ride felt surreal, an anxious whirlwind of thoughts and fears swirling chaotically in my mind. I promised myself I wouldn't allow fear to dictate my travels or mar my experiences, but that one encounter changed something profound inside me. Upon returning home, I encountered another aspect of fear while working at a local hotel. One evening, a suspicious guest checked in, a man with no luggage, an unsettling charm masking his true intentions. I could feel his piercing gaze on me as he approached the reception desk, casually asking about local attractions. But there was something sinister lurking behind his practiced smile, a hidden darkness that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. As the night dragged on, I noticed him loitering in the lobby long after he had checked in. The unease settled into my bones, my instincts screaming at me to alert my manager about the potential threat. But I kept my composure, focusing on my tasks and working hard to avoid making direct eye contact with him. When my shift finally came to an end, I walked towards my car under the growing shadows of dusk, my heart racing with every step as dread transformed into a palpable fear. I felt compelled to glance over my shoulder repeatedly, the nagging sensation that I was being watched intensifying with each hurried step. I hurried into my vehicle, locking the door with trembling hands, my heart pounding as I prepared to drive away. Yet the thoughts gnawed at me. What if he had followed me? What if I wasn't as safe as I thought? The fear morphed into a silent torment as I navigated through the quiet, empty streets, each turn amplifying the sense of vulnerability I felt. I felt exposed, as if the entire world were watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down and succumb to the darkness that threatened to envelop me. Those experiences lingered in my mind long after the events had unfolded, shaping a new reality where every shadow held a potential threat. The tales I had once consumed with curiosity and interest morphed into haunting reminders of my own fragility as a woman navigating a world filled with threats. The vulnerability of being alone in that world continued to reverberate through my encounters, stirring feelings of anxiety and wariness I had never known before. In the months following those events, I learned how to navigate my fear, honing an ability to remain vigilant without sliding into a state of constant paranoia. Every step I took into the outside world was accompanied by a heightened awareness of my surroundings, those lingering shadows lurking in the corners of my vision now a part of my daily reality. Though I staunchly refused to allow fear to control my life, it never truly dissipated. Instead, it became a part of me, a silent guardian keeping alert in a world that could be both beautifully inviting and terrifyingly dark. And perhaps, in sharing my stories, I hope to awaken a sense of vigilance in others, profound reminders that we must never take our safety for granted. For every moment of blissful ignorance, there lies a shadow patiently waiting to invade our minds with a dose of reality that can upend our lives unexpectedly. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was an ordinary evening, or at least it started out that way, when I first noticed that something was amiss in my home. The air felt thicker than usual, charged with an unshakable sense of dread that seemed to seep into the very walls around me. I had just returned from a long day at work, the familiar sounds of my neighborhood fading behind me as I stepped into the dimly lit hallway of my house. My footsteps echoed softly, a haunting reminder of my solitude that filled the space with an unsettling resonance. Little did I know that my life was about to take a turn into the unimaginable, a descent into a darkness I had never anticipated. I had always considered my basement a mere storage space, a place for forgotten boxes, old furniture, and dusty memories that had long since lost their significance. It was a part of the house I rarely visited, preferring to keep the door closed and the contents hidden from view. But on that fateful evening, as I descended the creaking stairs, a feeling of inexplicable pull washed over me, a whisper in the back of my mind urging me to explore the shadows that lurked below. The light flickered ominously, casting eerie shapes on the walls, and that's when I saw him, a figure lurking in the corner, half hidden behind a stack of old furniture that had long been forgotten. The intruder was a silhouette, indistinct yet undeniably present, a dark shape that seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. My heart raced in my chest as I stumbled back, the reality of the situation sinking in like a lead weight. Who was he? Why was he here, intruding upon the sanctity of my home? I stood frozen in place, caught between the instinct to flee and the overpowering desire to confront this unknown entity that had invaded my space. It was then that I remembered the strange rules I had heard whispered among friends in hushed tones, cautionary tales of encounters that spiraled into madness and despair. One rule stood out above the rest, echoing in my mind like a warning bell: never engage. Never speak. The moment you utter a word, you invite chaos into your life. The intruder would move closer, his presence intensifying, his intentions darkening with every syllable spoken. I had no choice but to abide by these rules, to remain silent and observant, to watch as he inched forward with a relentless advance that filled me with terror. Each week, I noted his progress, the way he seemed to draw nearer, a slow but inevitable approach that made my skin crawl. Days turned into weeks, and I became a prisoner in my own home, a reluctant captive of my own fears. I barricaded the basement door, but it was futile. The intruder was not bound by physical barriers or locks. He was a manifestation of my fears, my regrets, and the ghosts of my past that refused to be silenced. I could feel him watching me, his gaze penetrating the walls I had built around myself, each glance a reminder of the unresolved issues I had long ignored. The silence between us grew heavy, laden with unspoken words and unacknowledged truths that hung in the air like a thick fog. As the weeks passed, I began to notice patterns in his movements. He would take a step forward every 7 days, a slow but deliberate march toward me that filled me with dread. Each time he moved, I felt a jolt of panic, a visceral reaction that left me breathless and trembling. I tried to distract myself, filling my days with mundane tasks, chores that offered a semblance of normalcy, but the looming presence in the basement was a constant reminder of my reality, a shadow that refused to be ignored. I started to see shadows in the corners of my vision, flickers of movement that sent chills down my spine, igniting a primal fear deep within me. The nights were the worst. I would lie awake, listening to the creaks of the house settling, the whispers of the wind outside that seemed to carry his name. I could almost hear him breathing, a low, rhythmic sound that matched the pounding of my heart, a haunting melody that played in the background of my thoughts. I was losing myself in this nightmare, my mind spiraling into darkness, consumed by a fear that felt all-encompassing. Then came the night I broke the first rule, a moment of weakness that shattered the fragile barrier I had constructed around my sanity. I had been pacing the living room, my mind racing with anxiety and dread, when I accidentally called out into the emptiness, "What do you want?" The silence that followed was deafening, a void that swallowed my words whole. I felt a chill creep down my spine, a cold realization settling in that instant I had made a grave mistake, one that would have dire consequences. The intruder advanced faster than ever, his presence now an overwhelming force that filled the basement with a sense of impending doom. I could hear him moving, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the confines of my mind, each step a reminder that I had unleashed something I could not control. Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped in a web of my own making, and the only way out was to confront the darkness I had long avoided, to face the fears I had kept at bay for far too long. In the days that followed, the intruder became bolder, more audacious. He no longer waited a week to move. It felt as though he was closing in on me with every passing hour, each moment stretching into an eternity. I could see his features more clearly now, a face that was both familiar and foreign, a reflection of my own fears and insecurities laid bare. It was as if he was peeling back the layers of my psyche, exposing the raw wounds I had buried deep within, forcing me to confront the pain I had tried so hard to forget. I began to understand that this intruder was not a mere figment of my imagination. He was a manifestation of my past traumas, the unresolved pain that had haunted me for years. Each step he took was a reminder of the mistakes I had made, the relationships I had lost, and the fears I had allowed to fester like open wounds. I was confronted with the reality of my own existence, and it terrified me to my core, leaving me feeling vulnerable and exposed. As the nights grew longer, I found myself spiraling into despair, the weight of my fears pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. I could no longer distinguish between reality and the nightmares that plagued my mind, the lines blurring until they were indistinguishable. I sought solace in the outside world, but the intruder followed me, lurking in the shadows of my thoughts, a constant reminder of my inner turmoil. I tried to reach out to friends, to share my burden, but the fear of being misunderstood held me back, trapping me in a cycle of isolation, my own worst enemy. Then came the day I could no longer bear the weight of my silence. I stood before the basement door, trembling with fear and determination, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to confront the intruder, to face the darkness that had taken root in my life and refused to let go. With a deep breath, I steeled myself and opened the door, descending into the depths of my own mind, ready to confront the fears that had haunted me for so long. The basement was darker than I remembered, the air thick with tension and unspoken words. I could feel the intruder's presence, a palpable energy that sent shivers down my spine, igniting a spark of courage within me. I took a step forward, my heart racing as I called out, "I know who you are." The words hung in the air, a declaration that echoed off the walls, reverberating in the silence that enveloped us. The intruder stepped into the light, and I was confronted with my own reflection. His features mirrored mine, but there was a darkness in his eyes that sent a jolt of fear through me, a reminder of the shadows I had tried to escape. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice a low, haunting whisper that resonated within me. "But I am a part of you. You cannot escape me, no matter how hard you try." In that moment, I realized the truth. The intruder was not an external threat, but a representation of everything I had tried to suppress, a physical embodiment of my fears, my regrets, and my pain, all wrapped into one. I had spent so long running from him that I had forgotten the most important lesson of all. To confront my demons is to reclaim my power, to take back control of my life. I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest, the fear slowly transforming into resolve. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I declared, my voice steady and unwavering. "I will face my fears, and I will not let you control me any longer." The intruder's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, as if he had never expected me to stand my ground. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of vulnerability in his eyes, a hint of the humanity that lay beneath the surface. As I stood before him, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me, a wave of clarity that swept away the fog of fear. The shadows that had once loomed large began to recede, and in their place, I found a sense of understanding. I understood that the intruder was not my enemy, but a part of my journey, a necessary aspect of my growth. He represented the pain I had endured, but also the strength I had gained through my struggles, a testament to my resilience. With each passing moment, I felt the weight of my fears lifting, the burden becoming lighter as I embraced the truth of my existence. The basement, once a dark prison, transformed into a space of healing and acceptance. I reached out to the intruder, my hand trembling as I touched his shoulder, the connection igniting a spark of understanding between us. "I accept you," I whispered, and in that instant, something profound shifted within me, a release of the tension that had held me captive for so long. The intruder smiled, a soft, understanding smile that spoke of forgiveness and acceptance, a recognition of the shared struggle we both faced. "You are not alone," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness, a promise that resonated deep within my soul. "We can face this together." And just like that, the darkness that had consumed me began to fade, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal that filled my heart with light. I emerged from the basement, a weight lifted from my shoulders, the air outside feeling fresher and more vibrant than ever before. The world beyond the door felt brighter, the colors more vivid, as if I had been reborn into a new reality. I had faced my fears, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my life from the shadows that had threatened to swallow me whole. The intruder was no longer a threat, but a reminder of my resilience, a testament to the strength that lay within me, waiting to be unleashed. As I stepped into the sunlight, I realized that the journey was far from over. I would continue to confront my fears, to face the shadows that lurked in the corners of my mind, knowing that they were a part of me that could no longer be ignored. But now, I understood that I was not alone in this battle. The intruder had become a part of my story, a reflection of my growth, and together, we would navigate the complexities of life, facing whatever challenges lay ahead. In the end, I learned that the most profound battles we face are not against external forces, but within ourselves. The intruder was a manifestation of my struggles, a reminder that healing begins when we confront our fears head-on, embracing them rather than running away. And as I looked toward the future, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, knowing that I had the strength to face whatever lay ahead, equipped with the knowledge that I could overcome the darkness that once threatened to consume me. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. From the moment I opened my eyes to the vast and vibrant world around me, I was destined to be different, to stand apart from the rest. I was born into a lively litter of German Shepherd puppies, but unlike my siblings, I was the only one to survive the harsh trials of life. My mother, a fierce protector with a heart full of love, had given birth to 6 of us, yet the cruel realities of existence snuffed out the tiny lives of my brothers and sisters, leaving me alone in a world that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. As I lay there, vulnerable and uncertain, I had no inkling that my very existence would soon cast a long, dark shadow over my family, altering their lives in ways they could never have anticipated. I was named Princess, a title that felt both regal and ironic, as if it were a cruel joke played by fate. My early days were filled with the warmth of a loving family who doted on me, showering me with affection, treats, and care. They nurtured me, and I thrived in their presence, basking in the joy of being their cherished pet. But as I grew, something within me began to change, an unsettling transformation that I could neither comprehend nor control. I became acutely aware of a darkness that lurked just beneath my playful exterior, waiting for the right moment to emerge. It started with the rabbits in our backyard, innocent creatures that frolicked in the grass. At first, I merely chased them, my instincts kicking in as I darted across the lawn, feeling the thrill of the chase. But soon, the exhilaration of the hunt consumed me entirely. I killed my first rabbit one sunny afternoon, and the rush of power surged through my veins like a wildfire. The family was horrified, their faces pale with shock and disbelief, but I felt a twisted sense of pride swell within me, a dark satisfaction that I could not shake. As the weeks turned into months, my behavior became increasingly erratic and unpredictable. I discovered that I had a taste for more than just rabbits. My appetite for chaos was insatiable. One fateful day, I encountered a litter of kittens that had innocently wandered into our yard, their innocent mews echoing in my ears like a haunting melody. But instead of feeling compassion for these helpless beings, I felt an overwhelming hunger, a primal urge that drove me to pounce. In a matter of moments, I had silenced their cries forever, leaving only silence in my wake. The horror etched on my family's faces was unforgettable, a tableau of fear and disbelief. They looked at me with a mix of emotions, their eyes wide with terror, as if I were a monster that had emerged from the darkest corners of their nightmares. My father, a man of unwavering strength and determination, tried desperately to understand me, to reach the part of me that still resembled the loving companion he had wanted. He believed that my behavior was a result of my upbringing, that perhaps I had not been socialized properly or had not learned the right lessons about love and companionship. He spent countless hours training me, attempting to mold me into the loyal companion he envisioned, the protector of our home. But no matter how hard he tried, the darkness within me only grew stronger. I could see the fear in his eyes, the way he hesitated to approach me after each incident, the unspoken tension that hung heavy in the air, replacing the bond we once shared. It was as if a chasm had opened between us, and I was powerless to bridge it. As time went on, tragedy struck our family in a way that none of us could have foreseen. My father, who had always been my protector, became a victim of my unpredictable nature. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our backyard, I lashed out at him in a moment of pure instinct, a surge of aggression that I could not control. He fell to the ground, injured and bewildered, and I stood over him, panting heavily, my heart racing with confusion and fear. The realization of what I had done hit me like a thunderbolt, a jarring wake-up call, but it was too late to take it back. The damage was done, and there was no way to undo the horror I had unleashed. My father's injury was severe, and the family was forced to confront a heartbreaking decision that weighed heavily on their hearts. They could not keep me anymore. The fear that I had instilled in them was insurmountable, a barrier that could not be crossed. I could see the pain in my mother's eyes as she made the call that would forever alter our lives. The vet arrived, and I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me, a strange acceptance of my fate. I did not fully understand the finality of what was about to happen, the permanence of the decision that had been made. I was led outside, the cool evening air brushing against my fur, and I looked up at my father one last time. He was pale, trembling, and I could see the love still flickering in his eyes, despite the fears that had taken root deep within him. In that moment, I felt a pang of regret, a deep yearning to be the loyal companion he had always wanted me to be, but the darkness within me had won, leaving me feeling hollow and lost. As the vet approached, I felt a strange sense of acceptance wash over me, as if I had become a creature of instinct, driven by something primal and untamed that I could not escape. The shot rang out, and I felt a sharp pain, followed by an overwhelming sense of release, a liberation from the turmoil that had plagued me for so long. I was free from the chaos that had defined my existence, but my family was left to grapple with the aftermath of my actions, the consequences of my inability to control the darkness within me. Days turned into weeks, and the absence of Princess left a gaping hole in our home, a void that could not be filled. My family mourned not just for me, but for the dreams and hopes that had been shattered along with my spirit. The echoes of my misdeeds reverberated through the walls, a constant reminder of the darkness that had taken hold of me and altered the course of our lives forever. My father, once a figure of strength and resolve, became a shadow of his former self, a man haunted by the memories of that fateful day, the moment when I had turned against him, shattering the trust that had once existed between us. As time passed, I became a ghost in their memories, a fleeting presence that lingered in the corners of their minds. They spoke of me in hushed tones, recounting the moments of joy intertwined with the horror I had inflicted, the bittersweet recollections that now felt tainted by the darkness of my actions. The family struggled to find closure, and the specter of my existence haunted every corner of the house, a reminder of what had been lost. My mother often found herself staring out into the yard, lost in thought, as if she could still see me chasing rabbits or playing in the grass, the innocence of those moments now overshadowed by the tragedy that had unfolded. My absence was a wound that would never fully heal, a scar etched into the fabric of their lives. In the years that followed, my family learned to cope with the void I had left behind, navigating the complexities of grief and loss. They adopted another dog, a sweet Labrador named Max, who brought laughter back into their lives, a glimmer of joy amidst the lingering sorrow. But even as they moved forward, the shadow of Princess remained, a constant reminder of the fine line between love and fear, between nature and nurture. My story became a cautionary tale, a narrative that echoed through their conversations, a reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictable nature of existence. I wonder now, as I watch them from the other side, if my actions were truly a reflection of my nature or the result of the environment that shaped me. Was I born with this darkness, or did it emerge in response to the world around me, a consequence of the struggles and challenges I faced? The question lingers, unanswered, as I exist in this ethereal space between life and death, a realm where the boundaries of time and memory blur into one. In the end, I was just a dog, a creature of instinct and emotion, caught in a web of circumstances beyond my control. I was loved, feared, and ultimately lost, a paradox that left an indelible mark on my family. They continue to carry the weight of my memory, a bittersweet reminder of the complexities of love and the shadows that can dwell within us all, a testament to the enduring power of both joy and sorrow that defines the human experience. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. During the summer of my 32nd year, I found myself irresistibly drawn to the allure of nature, the serenity of the great outdoors beckoning me like a long-lost friend. My loyal companion, Tango, a spirited golden retriever with a golden coat that shimmered in the sunlight, was always by my side, ready for any adventure that awaited us. This time, I decided to camp deep in the heart of Montana, a place renowned for its breathtaking landscapes and towering pines that stood like ancient sentinels watching over the earth. These majestic trees formed a lush green canopy that blanketed the kind of solitude that both thrilled and unnerved me, a paradox that I found strangely enticing. Upon our arrival at the campsite, an unsettling feeling crept over me, like a chill in the air that I couldn't quite shake off. I brushed it aside, attributing it to the isolation of the wilderness, the unfamiliarity of my surroundings gnawing at the back of my mind. The campground was relatively empty, its few occupants scattered like seeds across a vast field, each lost in their own world. The air buzzed with the gentle sounds of nature, a symphony of rustling leaves, chirping crickets, and the distant hoot of an owl, creating a soothing backdrop that should have calmed my nerves. However, the campground managers, a pair of stern-looking individuals in their mid-40s, went through an unusual set of rules that sent chills down my spine. No nighttime outings, they said in unison, their gazes piercing through me like arrows, filled with an intensity that made me feel as if I were being scrutinized under a magnifying glass. Anyone caught outside their tents after dark will face serious consequences. Their words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. They continued with their litany of instructions, emphasizing the prohibition of loud noises and campfires past a certain hour. I nodded, feeling like a child under the scrutiny of their overbearing parents, a sense of unease settling in my stomach. As a seasoned camper, I'd heard of camps with such rules before, some for safety and others steeped in a more sinister air of control that made my skin crawl. Yet, I respected the guidelines, vowing to adhere strictly to them. After setting up my tent and preparing our campsite, I took a moment to breathe in the crisp mountain air, savoring the scent of pine and earth. Tango and I then took a leisurely stroll through the surrounding woods, basking in the warmth of the fading sun, allowing the tranquility of the moment to wash over me. The day passed with no significant hiccups, save for the strange vibes emanating from the few lonely campers I encountered. An elderly man, sitting by a dimming lantern, wouldn't meet my gaze. His eyes darted around as if he were expecting something or someone, a caged animal on the brink of a breakdown. I shook off the feeling, attributing it to my overactive imagination, convincing myself that I was simply being overly cautious. As twilight began to blanket the forest, the management's rules weighed heavily on my mind, like a dark cloud looming overhead. The sunset transformed the sky into a canvas of oranges and purples, a breathtaking sight that should have filled me with awe, but instead, I felt a growing sense of dread. The forest grew darker, shadows stretching and cavorting ominously, as if they were alive and watching. Tango curled up beside me, oblivious to my unease, and I tried to focus on the peaceful environment, letting the sounds of chirping insects envelop me, hoping to drown out my racing thoughts. However, the tranquility shattered abruptly that night. The first howl echoed in the distance, a chilling, mournful sound that sent shivers down my spine, reverberating through the trees like an eerie melody. Tango's ears perked up, and his body stiffened beside me, instinctively sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The noise was unlike anything I had ever heard in the wilderness before. It sliced through the silence like a knife, sharp and penetrating. I reminded myself of the rules, of the consequences I had agreed to, clinging to the hope that they would protect me. I stayed inside the confines of my tent, though battling the desire to step outside, to confront whatever creature was howling in the night. My heart raced, thoughts spiraling into the dark abyss of my imagination as I lay there, taut with tension and fear, my mind conjuring up images of what could be lurking just beyond the thin fabric of my tent. The howls continued sporadically, drawing nearer until they morphed into a cacophony of barking and snarling that sent a jolt of terror through me. Tango patted softly beside me, letting out a few low whines, as if he could sense my dread and was trying to comfort me. I pressed my body against the tent's fabric, my breath hitching in my throat, each rustle of the leaves outside making it feel like the forest was closing in around us, suffocating and oppressive. After what felt like hours, the howls ceased, and silence reclaimed the night. Sleep eluded me, my mind replaying the terrifying sounds in a relentless loop. In my exhaustion, I finally drifted into a restless slumber, only to be jolted awake by another, more blood-curdling sequence of howls. This time, they seemed to be far too close for comfort, sending my heart racing anew. Tango whimpered lightly, and I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, a comfort, yet also a reminder that I was not alone in this surreal nightmare. Morning came slowly, the sun creeping over the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees, illuminating the world in a soft glow. I tentatively unzipped my tent and stepped outside, rejuvenated by the sun's warm embrace, grateful for the light that dispelled the darkness of the night. The world felt different in the light of day. The howling and the darkness of last night faded into the recesses of my mind like a bad dream that had lost its power. While I prepared breakfast, my thoughts wandered to the other campers, lingering on the unease that had settled over me since I arrived. I couldn't shake off the haunting feeling that something was terribly wrong in this place, a sense of foreboding that clung to me like a shadow. I decided to approach the elderly man from the night before, hoping he could shed light on the eerie occurrences that had plagued my thoughts. "Good morning," I ventured, trying to break the ice, but his eyes seemed to darken at the mention of the night's events, a flicker of fear crossing his features. "Stay close to the fire tonight," he whispered, his voice shaking as if the very act of speaking was a struggle. "The howling, it means something. You don't want to be wandering out after dark." His warning hung in the air like a storm cloud, oppressive and suffocating, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. My instinct told me to leave, to gather my gear and flee this cursed campground, but the allure of the wilderness pulled me back in, a siren call I couldn't resist. Tango and I went for a hike, determined to shake off the malaise that had settled over the campsite like a thick fog. The trails wound through dense thickets and open fields, offering breathtaking views of the surrounding mountains that seemed to reach for the sky. Nature was alive here, more vibrant than I remembered, the colors brighter, the sounds more pronounced. As we explored, I began to hear whispers among the trees, carried by the light breeze. It was almost as if the forest was trying to tell me something, secrets lingering just out of reach, tantalizingly close yet frustratingly unattainable. Tango pranced beside me, oblivious to the encroaching dread that clung to me like a second skin, his joy in the moment a stark contrast to my growing anxiety. Upon returning to the campsite, a tangible tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The few campers present shared knowing looks devoid of comfort, their conversations reduced to hushed whispers that faded whenever I approached, leaving me feeling like an outsider in a world I had once embraced. I prepared my meal while trying to ignore the growing unease, but the night loomed over me like a predator stalking its prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the sun set, painting the world in deep hues of blue and gray, I fortified my campsite with every flicker of light from the crackling fire, its warmth a small comfort against the chill of the encroaching darkness. Tango curled up at my feet, a reassuring presence amidst the rising anxiety, his soft breathing a reminder that I was not alone. Despite the camp rules ringing in my ears, I found myself tempted to venture outside, to confront the unknown that would soon emerge from the shadows. As darkness enveloped us, a chorus of howls shattered the seemingly peaceful night, sending my heart racing once more. Against my better judgment, I ventured outside, grabbing the flashlight that dangled from my tent, its beam cutting through the darkness. Tango followed at my heels, his protective instincts kicking in, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Looking around, I caught sight of movement in the shadows, a fleeting glimpse of something massive darting between the trees. A chill ran down my spine, paralyzing my body for myriad seconds as I struggled to comprehend what I had just seen. It took a moment to regain my wits, but I called out quietly to Tango, urging him to stay close, my voice barely above a whisper. The night dragged on, with the howls growing more intense, becoming an overwhelming symphony of despair mixed with rage. The wind whistled ominously, sending messages I couldn't decipher, piercing through the walls of my sanity. Tendrils of panic wound through me as the sounds grew nearer, echoing the fear embedded deep in my gut, a primal instinct that screamed for me to flee. Then, out of the enveloping darkness, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of chaos. A scream, raw and primal, broke the stillness, piercing the night like a knife. It was the kind of scream that penetrates the very marrow of your bones, a sound laced with finality and horror that sent my heart racing into overdrive. Before I could react, a group of campers burst into view, eyes wide with terror, their faces pale as ghosts. They ran past me, their shouts mingling with the howls, forming a dreadful symphony that echoed through the trees, a cacophony of fear that resonated deep within me. "Run! It's coming," one of them screamed, and I instinctively grabbed Tango's collar, urging him closer to me, my instincts screaming for us to escape. I turned to flee, unsure of where to go, but knowing I couldn't stay in this nightmare any longer. The chaos behind me surged, creating a frenzy of footsteps and frantic cries that filled the air with a palpable sense of dread. My heart pounded against my ribcage as I sprinted towards the safety of my tent, praying to get there before I stumbled into whatever was hunting us, whatever darkness had descended upon the campground. In the chaos of it all, shadows loomed larger in the darkness, twisting and morphing into shapes that danced on the edge of my vision. I made it to my tent, flinging myself inside, the fabric a thin barrier between me and the horrors outside. I didn't dare breathe, listening for any sign that whatever was lurking out there had come for me. The terrifying screams ceased, leaving only a haunting silence in their wake, an eerie calm that felt like the eye of a storm. An eternity passed before I dared to peek outside, the world lying eerily quiet, the fire flickering against the remains of the night. I slowly unzipped my tent, trembling with fear, and scanned the surroundings for any signs of life. Tango was still close, uncharacteristically calm, probing the air for scents I couldn't fathom, his instincts sharper than my own. The other campers had vanished, leaving their belongings strewn across the ground like remnants of a forgotten battle. Panic twisted in my gut as I called out, "Is anyone there?" My voice barely broke the silence, swallowed by the oppressive stillness that surrounded me. There was no answer, only the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl, a haunting reminder of what had transpired. With dread settling deeper into my bones, I ventured out again, clutching my flashlight like a lifeline. The scene that confronted me stole the breath from my lungs. The campsite was in disarray, burnt wood, abandoned gear, and the faint sound of distant howling, a brutal reminder of the night's horrors that clawed at my mind. I stumbled through the wreckage, where only echoes of laughter and warmth remained, now replaced by a chilling silence that echoed through the trees. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, an unkempt man with wild eyes and dirt-streaked skin, his clothes torn and ragged. "Did you hear them? The howls. They took them." He was shaking, his voice barely a whisper, a broken man haunted by what he had witnessed. "We have to go, now." His urgency sent a jolt of fear through me, and I felt the weight of his words settle heavily on my shoulders. The reality of the situation crashed down upon me, swimming in an abyss of fear and disbelief. I grabbed Tango tightly, feeling as if time had betrayed me, slipping through my fingers like sand. With no thought for the campground rules or the authority of the managers, I dashed away from the former site of camaraderie, leaving behind the remnants of what had once seemed like a peaceful retreat. Running into the woods, echoes of the night's events taunted me, coalescing into a storm of confusion as I tried to navigate through the oppressive darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. As I pushed through the brush, adrenaline surged through my veins, emboldening me to forge ahead, desperate to escape the horrors that lurked behind me. But suddenly, the howls returned, a cacophony of sorrow and terror that chased me through the underbrush, a haunting melody that filled the night with dread. An unseen force pulled at my legs, tripping me and sending me sprawling to the ground. I struggled, scrambling to my feet, heart pounding, racing away from the sound that enveloped me like a shroud. I could no longer tell which direction led to safety. Trees loomed menacingly around me, silhouettes dancing in the moonlight, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Tango barked, as if sensing the darkness that chased us, his instincts sharp and alert. In that moment, I finally understood. This forest was no sanctuary. It was a treacherous labyrinth, a predator masked in beauty, hiding its true nature behind a facade of tranquility. Desperation clawed at my throat, urging me to push onward, to escape the nightmare. "Run, Tango," I whispered, sprinting blindly into the unknown, the words barely escaping my lips as I fought to keep my panic at bay. The howls echoed ever nearer, filling the night sky with a dreadful sound that filled me with dread, a reminder that we were not alone in this forsaken place. My heart raced, pushing my legs to try to take me anywhere away from the nightmare that threatened to consume us. I stumbled upon the road that led back to civilization, the asphalt glowing faintly in the moonlight like a beacon of hope in the darkness. I could see headlights in the distance, flashing like beacons of hope, a promise of safety that fueled my determination. My feet pounded against the ground, desperation fueling every ounce of my being as I raced towards the light. As I reached the edge of the campground, I dared to look back, my last glimpse of that haunted place. The howls were quieter now, blending with the gentle rustle of the trees, a sinister lullaby bidding farewell to those who had dared to stay, a haunting reminder of the horrors that lingered in the shadows. Now, sitting here in the comfort of my home, surrounded by familiar sights and sounds, I reflect upon that fateful weekend in Montana. It's a memory marked by a blend of fear and fascination, a reminder of the wilderness's unpredictable nature and the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface. I still cherish the joy of hiking and exploring. However, my desire to camp remains stifled by the memories of shadows flickering in the dark, a lingering sense of unease that clings to me like a second skin. Tango lies contentedly at my feet, his fur gleaming in the sunlight, oblivious to the terrors we faced in that cursed place. Some may say it was all a figment of my imagination, a product of an overactive mind, but deep within me, I know better. The wilderness is a realm of both beauty and horror, a place where the line between the two can blur in an instant, and perhaps some secrets are best left undiscovered. The shadows of the wilderness linger, guardians of the untold stories that dwell within, waiting for the next unwitting traveler to stumble upon their dark embrace. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As I stood at the edge of the Cherokee National Forest, my heart raced with a tumultuous mix of excitement and dread. This was it, the moment I had both anticipated and feared for what felt like an eternity. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, elongated shadows across the dense undergrowth, and I could feel the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. This 3-day survival ritual was not merely a test of my skills, it was a rite of passage that had been passed down through generations, a tradition steeped in meaning and significance. I had to prove myself, to honor my ancestors, and to step into manhood with courage and resilience. With a deep, steadying breath, I shouldered my pack, filled with the essentials, a sturdy knife, a flint for starting fires, some dried food to sustain me, and a small tent that would serve as my shelter. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, diligently reading about survival techniques and practicing various skills in my backyard. Yet, despite all my preparations, nothing could truly prepare me for the profound solitude of the wilderness. As I took my first steps into the forest, the familiar sounds of civilization faded away, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant, melodic call of a bird echoing through the trees. The first day unfolded like a whirlwind of activity. I set up my camp near a small stream, its water sparkling in the afternoon sun like diamonds scattered across the surface. I spent hours gathering wood for a fire, meticulously collecting dry branches and twigs, and setting snares for small game, my heart racing with anticipation. The thrill of hunting coursed through my veins as I imagined the satisfaction of catching my first meal, a rite of passage in itself. As night fell, I lit my fire and cooked a small rabbit I had managed to trap, the flames dancing in the darkness. The taste was unlike anything I had experienced before, wild, fresh, and free. I felt a surge of pride as I savored my hard-earned meal, believing I had conquered my fears and earned my place in this ancient tradition. But as darkness enveloped the forest, an unsettling feeling crept over me like a cold fog. The once comforting sounds of nature transformed into an eerie symphony, a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. The crackling of the fire seemed to echo louder in the stillness, and the shadows danced menacingly around me, twisting and turning as if they had a life of their own. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. However, as I lay in my tent, the sensation that I was being watched lingered, a persistent whisper in the back of my mind that refused to be silenced. The second day dawned with a thick fog hanging heavily over the forest, obscuring my view and dampening the air. I ventured deeper into the woods, determined to find more food and perhaps discover a better campsite, somewhere that felt safer. The air was damp and heavy, and the silence was deafening, wrapping around me like a shroud. I stumbled upon a clearing filled with strange markings on the trees, symbols I didn't recognize, ancient and mysterious. My heart raced as I traced my fingers over them, feeling an inexplicable connection to the land and its history, as if the spirits of those who had come before me were watching. Yet, a sense of foreboding washed over me, urging me to leave this place, to turn back before it was too late. I spent the day hunting and gathering, but my mind was clouded with unease, the feeling of being watched growing stronger with each passing hour. As night fell, I returned to my camp, the fog thickening around me like a living entity. I lit my fire and tried to focus on the warmth it provided, but the feeling of being watched returned, more intense than before. I could hear whispers in the wind, a language I couldn't understand, a cacophony of voices that sent chills down my spine. Sleep eluded me, and I sat by the fire, my knife clutched tightly in my hand, ready to defend myself against whatever lurked in the darkness. It was on the third night that everything changed, and the forest was alive with sounds, howls that echoed through the trees, rustling leaves that seemed to whisper secrets, and the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the underbrush. My heart raced as I gripped my knife, staring into the darkness, the shadows shifting and swirling around me. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night, a sound of pure terror that sent chills racing down my spine. I recognized the voice. It was my father. Panic surged through me as I stumbled out of my tent, my heart pounding violently in my chest. I ran towards the sound, calling out for him, but the forest swallowed my voice, consuming it in its depths. The trees loomed over me, their branches like skeletal hands reaching out from the shadows, grasping at my very soul. I felt the presence of something sinister lurking just beyond the firelight, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. As I reached the clearing where the scream had come from, I was met with a sight that would haunt me forever. My father lay on the ground, his body twisted and lifeless, surrounded by a dark, viscous substance that glistened ominously in the dim light. I fell to my knees, disbelief coursing through me like a poison. The forest that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a tomb, a place of death and despair. Suddenly, I heard it, the low, menacing growl of a creature emerging from the shadows, its presence palpable and terrifying. My instincts kicked in, and I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline flooding my veins, urging me to escape. I sprinted through the trees, branches clawing at my skin as I fled, the growl growing louder, closer, and I could feel the breath of the creature on my neck, hot and heavy. I ran blindly, my mind racing with fear and grief, the world around me becoming a blur. I could hear the snapping of twigs behind me, the heavy footsteps of the beast pursuing me with relentless determination. I stumbled over roots and fallen branches, falling to the ground in a tangle of limbs, and in that moment of vulnerability, I felt a surge of primal fear. I had to survive, I had to honor my father's memory and escape this nightmare. I pushed myself up and continued to run, my lungs burning and my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The forest was a maze, and I had lost all sense of direction, the darkness closing in around me like a suffocating blanket. But I couldn't stop. I could hear it closing in on me, feel its presence looming just behind me. I ducked behind a large tree, pressing my back against the rough bark as I tried to catch my breath. My heart raced in my chest, and I strained to listen for any sign of the creature, every sound amplified by my fear. The growling stopped, and a chilling silence enveloped me, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. I dared to peek around the tree, my heart pounding in my ears, and that's when I saw it. The creature was unlike anything I had ever seen, tall and sinewy, with eyes that glowed like embers in the dark, piercing through the shadows. Its fur was matted and dark, blending seamlessly with the night, a perfect predator in its element. It sniffed the air, searching for me, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me, paralyzing my thoughts. In that moment, I realized I had to confront this monster. It was not just a creature of the forest, it was a manifestation of my deepest fears, a reflection of the darkness that lurked within me. I took a deep breath, gripping my knife tightly, and stepped out from behind the tree, my heart pounding with both fear and determination. The creature turned its gaze towards me, and for a moment, we locked eyes, a silent understanding passing between us. Time seemed to freeze as I felt an inexplicable connection to this beast, a shared recognition of the struggle we both faced. With a primal scream that echoed through the trees, I charged at it, my knife raised high. It lunged towards me, and we collided in a flurry of fur and claws, a chaotic dance of survival and instinct. I fought with everything I had, fueled by the memory of my father and the desperate need to survive in this unforgiving wilderness. The struggle felt eternal, a battle of wills, but in a final surge of adrenaline, I plunged my knife into the creature's side, feeling the resistance of its flesh against the blade. It let out a deafening roar, a sound of pain and fury, and I felt its weight shift as it collapsed to the ground, defeated. Breathless and trembling, I stumbled back, watching as the creature lay still, its ember-like eyes dimming. I had faced my fear and emerged victorious, but at what cost? The forest felt different now, quieter, as if acknowledging the battle that had just taken place. I sank to my knees, tears streaming down my face as I mourned my father and the loss of my innocence, the weight of my experiences crashing down upon me. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the clearing with a soft, golden light. I knew I had to leave the forest and return to my family, but I would carry the weight of this experience with me forever, a reminder of the fragility of life. I had faced the darkness within and emerged stronger, but I also understood the importance of respecting the wilderness and the forces that reside within it. With a heavy heart, I gathered my belongings and made my way out of the Cherokee National Forest, the memories of my father and the creature forever etched in my mind. Each step I took was a reminder of the trials I had faced and the lessons I had learned. I was no longer just a boy, I was a man who had confronted his fears and emerged from the shadows, forever changed by the journey I had undertaken. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. In the heart of our quaint little town, nestled snugly between the old, dusty library and a charming coffee shop that always seemed to be bustling with activity, stood a church that had become a second home to me over the years. It was a place filled with warmth and laughter, where every Friday evening, a diverse group of us would gather for our youth meetings. We were a motley crew of teenagers, each of us seeking connection, friendship, and a sense of purpose in the world. Our meetings were a delightful mix of laughter and shared stories, and we often engaged in various games that tested our creativity, ingenuity, and resourcefulness. One particularly captivating game involved trading items, a simple yet thrilling activity where we exchanged trinkets and treasures, each trade more imaginative and entertaining than the last. On one fateful Friday evening, our group decided to up the ante and take our trading game to the next level. We pooled our meager possessions, bringing whatever we could find, and after a series of spirited trades, we had amassed a collection of items that could rival any flea market. The ultimate prize for our collective efforts was an Xbox, a coveted device that promised endless hours of entertainment and joy. As the evening wore on, whispers of excitement and anticipation filled the room, and the stakes grew higher with each passing moment, creating an electrifying atmosphere that was hard to resist. During one of the more intense trading rounds, a peculiar woman entered the church. She was hunched over, her silver hair cascading down her back like a waterfall, and her eyes sparkled with a strange, almost otherworldly light. The atmosphere shifted as she approached our group, a sense of intrigue and curiosity enveloping us. Without uttering a word, she reached into her tattered bag and pulled out a silver key, its surface shimmering under the dim lights of the room, catching our attention and sparking our imaginations. "This key," she said, her voice a raspy whisper that sent chills down my spine, "can open any lock. Use it wisely." With that cryptic statement, she handed it to us, her gnarled fingers brushing against mine for just a fleeting moment. I felt a chill run down my spine, a mixture of fear and curiosity swirling within me, but my curiosity ultimately overpowered my apprehension. We accepted the key, adding it to our growing collection of oddities, our imaginations running wild with the endless possibilities it held for us. Years passed, and life took me down unexpected paths, leading me away from the innocence of my youth. The Xbox became a distant memory, a relic of simpler times, but the silver key remained tucked away in a drawer, a forgotten piece of my childhood. I often thought of that strange woman and her cryptic words, but life had a way of making us forget the mysteries and wonders of our youthful days. It wasn't until I moved back to town after completing college that the memories resurfaced, igniting a spark of curiosity within me that I thought had long been extinguished. One rainy afternoon, as I was cleaning out my old belongings, I stumbled upon the key once more. Its presence felt like an invitation, a call to adventure that I couldn't ignore. I decided to explore the town, seeking out locks that might yield to the silver key, eager to uncover the mysteries it might unlock. I started with the old library, a place where I had spent countless hours as a child, losing myself in the pages of countless books. To my astonishment, the key fit perfectly into a hidden door at the back of the building, a door I had never noticed before, concealed by time and neglect. As I turned the key, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with dust and shadows that seemed to come alive in the flickering light. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation as I stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of age and forgotten memories. The room was adorned with bizarre sculptures, each more grotesque than the last, twisted figures and abstract shapes looming over me, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. The atmosphere was charged with an unsettling energy, and I felt an inexplicable pull to explore further, drawn deeper into the room's embrace. I wandered deeper into the room, my senses heightened and alert to every sound and movement. The sculptures seemed to whisper secrets, their forms shifting subtly in the flickering light, as if they were alive and aware of my presence. I could hardly believe my eyes. This place was a treasure trove of the strange and the surreal, a gallery of nightmares and wonders intertwined. But as I ventured further, a sense of dread began to creep in, wrapping around me like a shroud. The atmosphere grew heavier, and I could feel something watching me from the shadows, a presence lurking just beyond my line of sight. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the room, a low growl that sent shivers down my spine and made my heart race. I turned, my breath catching in my throat, to see a creature emerging from the darkness, its form twisted and grotesque, a nightmarish amalgamation of features that defied description. Its eyes glowed like embers in the dark, and its mouth was filled with sharp, jagged teeth that glistened ominously. Panic surged through me as I stumbled backward, desperately searching for an escape from this waking nightmare. In that moment of sheer terror, I instinctively reached for the silver key, my last link to safety and sanity. But to my horror, it was gone. I frantically searched my pockets, my heart racing as I realized the key had vanished without a trace. The creature advanced toward me, its growls growing louder, a cacophony of sound that filled the room and drowned out my thoughts. I was trapped, utterly alone, and completely helpless against the terror that loomed before me. As the creature lunged at me, I felt a wave of despair wash over me, a crushing realization of my own foolishness. I had been so naive to think I could wield the power of the key without consequence. The room spun around me, and I could feel my sanity slipping away like sand through my fingers. I stumbled backward, falling against one of the grotesque sculptures, and in that moment, everything went black. When I awoke, I found myself outside the library, drenched in rain and shivering uncontrollably. The memory of the creature and the room haunted me, a lingering nightmare that refused to fade into the recesses of my mind. I rushed home, my thoughts racing with questions that seemed to spiral endlessly. What had I unleashed? What had the key truly been capable of unlocking? Days turned into weeks as I grappled with the experience, replaying it over and over in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that the key had been more than just a simple object. It had been a gateway to something far more sinister, a portal to realms best left unexplored. I began to hear whispers around town, rumors of disappearances and strange occurrences linked to the library. It seemed I was not the only one who had stumbled upon its dark secrets, and the weight of those whispers pressed heavily upon my shoulders. Determined to uncover the truth behind the key and the shadows it had cast, I returned to the library, hoping to find answers that would bring me some semblance of peace. I spoke to the librarian, an elderly woman who had worked there for decades, her eyes filled with wisdom and sorrow. Her expression changed when I mentioned the silver key, and she leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid of being overheard. "Many have sought that key," she said, her expression grave and serious. "It is said to open doors to realms beyond our understanding. But those who venture too far often pay a terrible price." Her words sent a chill down my spine, and I realized the gravity of what I had experienced, the weight of the warnings echoing in my mind. I spent the following days researching the library's history, uncovering tales of those who had encountered the key before me, each story more chilling than the last. The accounts were filled with madness and despair, tales of individuals who had ventured into the unknown and never returned. It became clear that the key was not merely a tool, it was a curse, a harbinger of horrors beyond comprehension, a dark legacy that had claimed many before me. As I delved deeper into the library's archives, I discovered a hidden journal belonging to the strange woman who had given us the key all those years ago. Her writings were frantic, filled with sketches of the grotesque sculptures and descriptions of the creature that had haunted her dreams. She had been a guardian of the key, tasked with keeping its power in check, but she had failed, and the consequences of her failure were dire and far-reaching. The more I read, the more I understood the connection between the key and the bizarre room. It was a place where nightmares took form, a realm where the boundaries of reality blurred and twisted into something unrecognizable. I felt a growing sense of dread as I realized that I had unwittingly become part of this dark legacy, a pawn in a game that was far beyond my understanding. In the weeks that followed, I became obsessed with finding the key once more. I retraced my steps, searching every corner of the library, but it was as if the key had never existed, as if it had been erased from reality itself. I had lost not only a physical object, but also a piece of my sanity, the whispers of the townsfolk growing louder in my ears. I could sense their fear, their growing unease with the strange happenings surrounding the library, and I felt as if I were being drawn into a web of darkness. One evening, as I wandered through the town, I felt a strange pull towards the old church. It stood as a reminder of my youth, a place where I had once felt safe and secure. I entered the building, the familiar scent of wood and incense wrapping around me like a comforting blanket, but something felt different this time. The air was charged with an unseen energy, a tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. As I walked down the aisle, I noticed a flicker of light coming from the altar, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. I approached, my heart racing with anticipation, and found a small box resting on the surface, its presence almost ethereal. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing a single silver key, my silver key. It gleamed in the dim light, and I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me, a feeling of hope that I thought I had lost forever. But that relief was short-lived as I remembered the horrors it had unlocked, the darkness it had unleashed. I took the key in my hand, feeling its cool surface against my skin, the weight of it feeling both familiar and foreign, a reminder of the darkness it had brought into my life. I knew I had to make a choice, to confront the creature once more, to face the darkness that had haunted me, or to bury the key and the memories it held forever in the depths of my mind. In that moment of uncertainty, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. I would not let the key control me or dictate my fate. I would face the darkness head-on and reclaim my life from the shadows that threatened to consume me. I left the church, the key clutched tightly in my hand, and made my way back to the library, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear. As I stood before the hidden door once more, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I inserted the key into the lock, the familiar sensation sending shivers down my spine as the door creaked open, revealing the darkness within. I stepped inside, ready to confront the nightmares that awaited me, my resolve stronger than ever. The room was just as I remembered, filled with the grotesque sculptures that seemed to come alive in the dim light, their forms shifting and twisting in the shadows. But this time, I felt a sense of purpose, a determination that fueled my every move. I would not be a victim. I would reclaim my power and confront the darkness that had haunted me for so long. The creature emerged from the shadows, its growls echoing in the chamber, a chilling reminder of the fear that had once paralyzed me. I stood my ground, the silver key raised high, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice reverberating through the room, filled with a newfound strength. "You will not take me." In that moment, I felt a surge of energy coursing through me, the key glowing with an otherworldly light that illuminated the room. The creature hesitated, its form flickering as if caught between realms, and I knew then that the key was not just a tool, it was a part of me, a manifestation of my will and determination. With a burst of courage, I charged at the creature, the key acting as a beacon of light, guiding me through the darkness. As I approached, the creature let out a howl, a sound that echoed through the room and shook the very foundations of reality itself. But I pressed on, determined to confront the darkness that had haunted me for far too long. In an instant, the key pierced through the creature's form, and a blinding light enveloped us both, washing away the shadows that had clung to me for so long. The room trembled, and I felt a rush of energy as the darkness began to dissipate, the grotesque sculptures crumbling around me, their twisted forms breaking apart as if they were made of glass. I could sense the weight of the nightmares lifting, the oppressive atmosphere giving way to a sense of peace and clarity. When the light faded, I found myself alone in an empty room, the key lying in my hand, its surface now dull and lifeless. I had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but at what cost? The memories of the creature and the horrors of that room would forever linger in my mind, haunting me like shadows in the night. As I left the library, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the town, illuminating the path ahead. I knew that I had changed, that I would never be the same again. The silver key had opened doors I could never have imagined, revealing the depths of fear and courage within me that I never knew existed. I had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, forever marked by the experience and the lessons it had taught me. In the end, I realized that the key was not just a physical object, it was a symbol of my journey, a reminder of the power we hold within ourselves to confront our fears and rise above them. And as I walked away from the library, I understood that the true key to unlocking our potential lies not in objects or relics, but in our willingness to face the unknown and embrace the light. No matter how daunting the path may seem, hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I work for an air conditioning company, a profession I chose with the hope of pursuing a steady life amidst the hum of compressors and the whir of fans. It seemed like a reliable choice, one that would provide me with a sense of normalcy and routine. However, one fateful morning, I received an unusual service request that would change everything I thought I knew about my life and the world around me. A client wanted an HVAC system installed beneath her house. At first, I shrugged it off as odd, but people have their reasons for their requests, and frankly, I was eager to clock in some overtime. The thought of extra pay was too tempting to ignore, even if the job seemed peculiar. Upon arrival at the location, I found the house eerily silent, a stark contrast to the lively neighborhoods surrounding it. The vibrant sounds of children playing and cars passing by felt miles away from this desolate place. The front door was ajar, almost inviting me in or perhaps warning me away. A strange shiver ran down my spine as I hesitated at the threshold. I yelled out, hoping to hear a response, but my voice just echoed back to me, swallowed by the oppressive silence. Instead of warm welcomes, I was met with an unsettling void that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. On the door, a letter was taped, hastily scrawled with uneven handwriting. My heart raced as I peeled it off, its contents chilling me to the bone. Do not enter, seek elsewhere. What lies below is not for the faint of heart. Already, the day was becoming surreal, and I felt a creeping sense of dread. Nonetheless, I was here to work, and I couldn't let a warning deter me from my task. I stepped into the dim corridor, the stale air smelling of dust and neglect. I could almost hear the house breathing, its walls holding secrets, whispers echoing through the shadows that danced in the corners. As I ventured further, I reached the crawl space entry, my tools clanking quietly at my side, the sound almost mocking in the silence. The crawl space was cramped and dank, the air thick with moisture and the scent of decay. I knelt down, my flashlight illuminating the darkness that enveloped my surroundings like a shroud. Cobwebs hung like curtains, their delicate strands glistening in the beam of my light, and the smell of mildew was overwhelming, filling my nostrils with a sense of foreboding. As I navigated the treacherous terrain, I stumbled upon something unexpected, a trapdoor, slightly ajar, revealing a narrow staircase descending into even darker depths. Compelled by an instinct I couldn't fathom, I opened the door wider and descended. Each step creaked ominously under my weight, and I felt sweat bead on my forehead as I ventured down, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, I found a hidden basement, the atmosphere thick and oppressive. The air was heavier here, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else I couldn't quite identify. My flashlight flickered as I scanned the room, revealing the unexpected and sending a jolt of fear through me. Photographs hung on the walls, all of them featuring my sister, Sarah, who had disappeared 2 years ago under mysterious circumstances. My heart raced, disbelief and confusion washed over me in waves. Each photo depicted her in various locations, each one dated and accompanied by notes scrawled in the same frantic handwriting as the warning letter outside. Find me was a repeated plea, as if she were trapped in a silence I could only begin to understand, a silence that echoed my own growing despair. Beside the photographs, I found another letter, torn and weathered, as if it had been there for ages. It seemed to pulse with an energy that both intrigued and terrified me. As I read the words, the horrors of the situation unfolded before my mind's eye. Sarah had been here, digging into something she shouldn't have, something that ultimately consumed her, leaving behind only fragments of her existence. I felt like a trespasser in a story far more sinister than I had anticipated. Thunder rumbled outside, echoing my growing dread and amplifying the sense of danger that loomed over me. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows clawing at my sanity, whispering secrets I was not meant to uncover. I suddenly became aware of other items strewn across the floor, a collection of dolls, all with their eyes scratched out, scattered around a small, rusted mirror. Each piece of this chilling puzzle wove a darker narrative, one I wasn't prepared to confront, one that threatened to unravel the very fabric of my reality. Panic surged through my veins, and I felt an overwhelming urge to escape this place. As I turned to leave, a loud noise echoed from above, startling me. It sounded like footsteps, heavy and deliberate, as if someone were making their way towards me. My instincts kicked in, and I bolted up the stairs, 2 steps at a time, barreling through the trapdoor and back into the crawl space, desperate to escape whatever presence lurked behind me. Just then, I froze. Something felt profoundly wrong. The air shifted, a presence looming closer, chilling me to the bone. Heart pounding, I shoved the door shut and scrambled towards the exit, desperately trying to ignore the instinctive urge to look back. But curiosity got the better of me. I took a quick glance. The light from my flashlight flickered weakly, revealing a dark shape emerging from the shadows, something human yet not quite familiar, a figure that sent an icy chill coursing through my body. I sprinted through the house, bursting through the front door and tumbling onto the grass outside, gasping for air as I fought to regain my composure. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck, slamming the door behind me as if sealing the horrors inside, as if the metal barrier could protect me from what I had just witnessed. Shaking, I dialed 911, my fingers trembling as I recounted the tale to the operator, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please, you have to send someone immediately. There's something wrong with that house. My sister, she's been here." I cried, my words tumbling out in a breathless rush, but I quickly learned that my pleas only led to frustration. The officers arrived, skeptical of my story, their expressions a mix of disbelief and annoyance. They searched the house, led by my frantic insistence, but found nothing, no traces of Sarah, no evidence of anything unusual, just the empty shell of a home that seemed to mock my desperation. "Just an empty house," one cop shrugged, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. "You've got no proof, buddy." I felt the weight of disbelief suffocating me, each dismissal penetrating me deeper than I could manage. Days turned into a blur of emotions as uncertainty gnawed at my mind, a relentless ache that wouldn't subside. I couldn't shake off the sensation that something dark lay intertwined with my sister's fate, a thread that had now woven itself into my life, binding me to this mystery. But it didn't end there. Just a week later, the house caught fire. Flames licked at the sky, the entire structure collapsing in on itself, engulfed in an inferno that devoured all remnants of what had been. I stood, helpless and eerily calm, watching as the blaze wove a dance of destruction, a macabre performance that left nothing but ash in its wake. Questions swirled around me, but answers eluded my grasp, just like my sister had. That day, the air crackled with energy, a cruel reminder that some mysteries remain unsolved, leaving only shadows where truth once shimmered. I could still hear her distant voice calling my name, pleading for help I wasn't able to provide, a haunting echo that reverberated through my mind. In the aftermath, the absence of closure clung to me like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. I became a ghost within my own life, haunted by my search for Sarah and the dark whispers of a house that had swallowed her whole. Each day was a struggle against despair, every corner tinged with a lingering chill, as I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting to catch a glimpse of her in the distance, a fleeting shadow in my periphery. As weeks turned into months, the chilling memories of that day would not fade. I was now trapped in my own silent prison, yearning for answers that would only lead to more questions, a labyrinth of uncertainty that twisted my thoughts. What lay beneath that house? What had Sarah uncovered in her desperate search for truth? As the days dragged on, I was left to confront the gnawing thought that perhaps not all secrets are meant to be found, and perhaps the darker truths are best left buried, hidden away from the light of day, where they can fester and grow, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon them. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. In a peculiar neighborhood nestled between sprawling fields and overgrown woods, a legend whispered through the alleyways and crept into the hearts of its residents. They called him the Mower Man. I often overheard the tales exchanged in hushed tones by kids on the playground, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. It was said that he rode an old, rusty lawn mower, and his laughter sliced through the air like a knife, a sound that would send shivers down your spine. But that laughter was anything but joyful. It was the sound of something sinister lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The stories varied widely. Some claimed he'd mowed down weeds with a ferocity that was unnerving, while others insisted he had taken it much further, using that machine to sever the heads of neighbors who dared to defy him or even look at him the wrong way. The most chilling part of all? Layla, the girl from down the street, had just vanished one fateful evening, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a palpable sense of dread. The police searched high and low, but it was as if she had been consumed by the earth itself, leaving only whispers of her name hanging in the air like fog on a cold morning. With each passing day, the air felt thicker, and a sense of dread permeated our community, settling like a heavy blanket over us. I often found myself glancing over my shoulder, convinced I might catch a glimpse of him, the Mower Man, his shadow cutting through the twilight as he roared past on that rusty mower, a figure of nightmares. My parents laughed off the stories, dismissing them as the overactive imagination of children, but as the sun dipped below the horizon and the darkness crept in, those tales began to gnaw at me, burrowing deep into my mind. One afternoon, I was walking home from school, my mind tangled in the stories we shared, each one more horrifying than the last. I thought about Layla and how carefree she had been, her laughter bright against the backdrop of our seemingly dull neighborhood. I rounded the corner, and it felt as if the world had changed in an instant. The sound, a low, grumbling roar, cut through the silence, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, sending a jolt of fear through my body. I glanced toward the sound, and my heart raced uncontrollably. There, on the edge of the street, was a figure. He was hunched over the handle of a rusty mower, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over his features. As if sensing my gaze, he turned slowly, a grin stretching across his face, revealing uneven teeth that gleamed in the fading light. My breath quickened, and without thinking, I turned on my heel and ran, propelled by sheer instinct. The sensation of cold air against my skin was a sharp contrast to the fire of fear that coursed through me, igniting every nerve. I darted around corners, my mind becoming a frantic symphony of thoughts and questions. What if he was after me? What if I was the next name whispered in fearful tones on the playground? As I neared my house, I could hear the mower's growling engine trailing behind me, its sound growing nearer with each beat of my heart, a relentless reminder of the horror I was fleeing. I stumbled through the front door, slamming it shut behind me, the sound reverberating through our quiet home like a thunderclap. My parents were in the kitchen, oblivious to the storm raging in my mind, lost in their own world of mundane conversations and laughter. I needed to tell them, to warn them, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood there, peering through the window, watching the street with bated breath, my heart pounding in my chest. Minutes turned to hours, and darkness settled over the neighborhood like a heavy fog. The Mower Man was a figure etched in my mind, a villain in a story that had come alive in the most terrifying way. As night fell, I dared to take a step outside, just a quick look, I thought. But the moment my foot hit the porch, a chilling laughter echoed through the air, predatory and wild, wrapping around me like a vice. Panic flooded my veins, and I slammed the door shut, locking it tight, convinced that safety was just a bolt away. That night, sleep eluded me, slipping through my fingers like sand. I lay wide-eyed in the dark, haunted by the thought of Layla and the mower man, the story swirling in my mind like a tempest. Could I really live in fear forever? My imagination spiraled, conjuring images of him prowling our streets, a specter of dread that refused to let go. Days turned into a relentless cycle of paranoia and sleepless nights, each moment stretching into eternity. Finally, I made a decision, a choice born from desperation. I couldn't let fear rule my life any longer. I needed to confront this darkness that loomed over me like a storm cloud. So, one evening, under a blanket of stars that twinkled like distant eyes watching me, I slipped out of my house, fueled by curiosity and a flicker of bravery. My heart pounded against my ribcage as I walked toward the edge of the neighborhood where the stories usually began, the air thick with tension. I reached a clearing that separated our homes from the densely wooded area, the trees looming like ancient guardians. The air was still, but I felt it, the unmistakable roar of the mower, a sound that sent chills down my spine. My heart raced, yet I took a step further into the night, heading toward the sound that called to me like a siren song. I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame, even as my instincts screamed for me to stop and turn back. Then, I saw him. The mower man sat atop his machine, surrounded by the shadows of trees that loomed like titans in the night, their branches stretching out like skeletal fingers. He was an imposing figure, but it was his laughter that chilled me to the bone, sharp and mocking, like the sound of metal grinding against metal. I stood frozen, gripped by fear and intrigue, unable to move as he seemed to sense my presence. I barely registered my surroundings until I spotted him looking directly at me, his eyes glinting with a mischievous spark that sent an electric jolt of terror through me. I stumbled back, but then he lifted a hand, as if beckoning me closer, and I felt an inexplicable force pulling me forward. Before I knew it, I was standing just a few feet away from him, caught in a web of dread. The engine of the mower sputtered ominously, a low growl that matched the uneasy knotting in my stomach. "Why are you afraid?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly, echoing through the stillness of the night. "There's nothing to fear in the dark. It's merely a veil, hiding the truth from you." In that moment, I felt a powerful urge to flee, yet my legs remained rooted in place, paralyzed by a mix of fear and curiosity. "Layla," I muttered, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "Where is she?" He laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine, reverberating in the air like a death knell. "She sought the edge and found more than she bargained for. But fear not, she's not lost, just transformed into something new." With those words, the ground beneath me shifted, and I stumbled backward, my heart racing with panic. The shadows began to twist and morph around me, and I felt a sudden wave of terror wash over me. "What did you do to her?" I cried, my voice breaking, desperation clawing at my throat. "Perhaps you're next," he replied with a grin, sharpening the tension in the air to a razor's edge. The mower revved to life, a menacing growl that echoed through the clearing, and I turned to run, desperation pumping through my veins like adrenaline. I dashed toward home, each step echoing the promise of horror lurking behind me, the sound of the mower growing louder. As I reached my porch, I bolted inside, locking the door behind me with trembling hands. My heart raced, and I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. The encounter with the mower man lingered in my mind, saturating my thoughts with fear and dread. I knew he was out there, watching, waiting for the next moment to strike. Days passed, but the shadows in my mind didn't fade. Instead, they deepened. I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed, the sensation that he was always just out of sight. I began to notice strange signs, a lawnmower parked inexplicably outside my neighbor's house, odd laughter echoing in the deep of night that sent chills down my spine. I became a prisoner of my own fears, peeking through curtains and double-checking locks, convinced that the mower man was lurking just beyond my view. The community I once loved felt foreign, twisted by the veil of terror that had descended upon us. Every unfamiliar sound sent my heart racing, and every flicker of a shadow felt like a specter of the mower man stalking me, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then one fateful night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again, the grumbling roar of that old mower, relentless and hungry, echoing through the stillness of the night. My heart sank into my stomach. I stumbled out of bed and opened the curtains, my hands shaking. There he was, silhouetted against the moonlit sky, grinning at me with that haunting smile. It was as if he knew I was watching, relishing my fear, feeding off it like a parasite. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed my phone, dialing for help, but the line was dead, a cruel twist of fate. The world outside my window transformed into a hunting ground, filled with the echoes of laughter and the thrum of machinery. I was trapped in a nightmare that wouldn't end, the walls closing in around me. Suddenly, the lights flickered ominously, and I heard a thud against the door. It was him. My breathing quickened as he laughed again, an eerie sound that reverberated through the stillness of my home like a ghostly refrain. "Open up, and let's play," he taunted, his voice dripping with malice. I backed away, clutching a pillow like a shield against the terror that threatened to engulf me. He was relentless, pounding against the door, echoing the chaos in my mind, each thud a reminder of my helplessness. "You can't escape what you fear the most," he screamed, his voice almost playful, a twisted game to him. Just when I thought he would break in, there was another noise, a series of frantic barks. My heart leaped in my chest. My neighbor's dog began barking furiously, a protective guardian amidst yells of terror. The mower man paused, as if considering his next move, momentarily distracted. That distraction was all I needed. I raced through the house, my heart pounding in my chest, a drumbeat of fear and determination. I knew I had to find a way out, to break free from this curse that had taken hold of me. I burst through the back door and sprinted toward the woods, the familiar path now a lifeline. Behind me, I could hear him revving his mower, and I didn't dare look back, fear propelling me forward. As I plunged deeper into the heart of the forest, my legs burned from exertion, each step a fight against the darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. The brush scraped against my skin, and I could feel the air thickening with tension, the world around me closing in. But I couldn't stop. I had to get away, to escape the horror that chased me. The laughter faded, replaced with the whispers of the trees, offering solace amidst the chaos, a reminder that I was not alone. Finally, I reached a clearing, moonlight spilling across the ground like a silvery blanket. I shut my eyes, gasping for breath, listening for the sound of his mower cutting through the darkness, a sound that had become synonymous with fear. But instead of fear, I felt something shift within me, a flicker of courage igniting in my chest. I was no longer a scared child. I had confronted the monster in my mind and was ready to reclaim my life. I took a deep breath, clutching the resolve that had risen within me like a phoenix from the ashes. The stories of the mower man couldn't hold me captive any longer. They were just that, stories, products of our imagination and fears. I turned to face the woods, ready to reclaim my peace and confront the darkness that had haunted me for so long. In that moment, the fear transformed. It morphed into a defiance that coursed through my veins like fire. I realized that he was just a man, a product of the tales we wove from our own insecurities and anxieties. I wouldn't allow him to haunt my life any longer. I would not let fear dictate my existence. When I finally heard the soft rumble of his mower again, it didn't feel like the impending doom I once sensed. Instead, I envisioned taking back control of my fears, reclaiming my narrative. I turned away from the sounds of laughter and grumbling engines, stepping into the light of the moon. I would carve out my own story, one that no longer included the mower man. I would become a force stronger than the shadows and stories that had once ensnared me, a beacon of light in the darkness. In the following days, I faced the community and the remnants of fears left behind, standing tall against the weight of anxiety that had threatened to crush me. The burden lifted as I spoke up, sharing my experience, empowering others to confront their trepidations and reclaim their lives. The mower man became a symbol of our fears, one we could learn to dismantle rather than live in constant trepidation of. Together, we would rewrite the narrative of our lives, reclaiming laughter and joy that had been shadowed by fear and uncertainty, transforming our community into a place of resilience and strength. And as for the stories, they transformed, too. Instead of tales of terror, they morphed into tales of bravery and resilience, reminding us that darkness loses its power when we learn to face it head-on, to confront our fears rather than run from them. As I stood in that clearing one last time, I smiled, a sense of peace washing over me. The laughter around me changed, no longer haunting. It became a melody of courage, a testament to the strength that blooms when we refuse to let ourselves be defined by a shadow. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the light. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I never imagined that my career would lead me to become the transport officer for one of the most dangerous criminals in the world, Stuart Kavanaugh. To the untrained eye, he might have appeared almost ordinary. His build was unremarkable, and his skin bore no tattoos, which starkly contrasted with the brutal persona that had earned him his infamous reputation. But I knew better than to be deceived by appearances. The moment I laid eyes on him, I felt a chill run down my spine, a visceral reaction that told me I was in the presence of pure malevolence. There was an unsettling glint in his eye, a predatory instinct that made my skin crawl and my heart race. As we began our journey, Kavanaugh sat across from me, shackled but undeniably confident, his demeanor radiating a sense of control that was both unnerving and infuriating. I caught myself stealing glances at him, wondering what twisted thoughts were swirling in that dark mind of his. His lips curved into a smirk as he noticed my apprehension, and it sent my heart into a frenzied race. It was as if he could feel my fear, feeding off it like a vampire indulging in fresh blood. The way he spoke, with an eerie calmness that belied the chaos he had caused, boiled my blood. He'd casually mention his past, each word a dagger that pierced through the thin veil of security I had wrapped around myself. Being a guard must be such a rewarding job, he mused, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Imagine being responsible for keeping monsters like me behind bars. Just imagine all the nightmares you must have. It must be exhausting. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the grip of his words, which seemed to wrap around me like a suffocating shroud. I was just doing my job, but he made me feel like a mere pawn in a game I couldn't comprehend. My partner, Weber, tried to maintain a professional demeanor, but even he glanced nervously at Kavanaugh, as if unsure of how to handle the situation. The atmosphere in the transport vehicle grew heavy, the tension almost palpable, and every mile felt like an eternity stretching out before us. The roads twisted and turned like the thoughts racing through my mind, each bend and curve a reminder of the danger we were in. I recalled the stories I had heard about Kavanaugh. It wasn't just his infamous escape from a maximum security prison or the countless lives he had taken that haunted those who knew his name. It was the methodical way he executed his plans, the way he toyed with his victims before delivering the final blow. My imagination ran wild as I glanced at him, staring into those cold, calculating eyes. What was he plotting? Did he see me as just another obstacle in his path, or did he view me as a mere toy to be manipulated at his whim? Tell me, what would you do if I were to escape right now? He taunted, his voice low and seductive, dripping with a confidence that made my skin crawl. Would you sacrifice yourself for your partner, or would you run? I'd love to see how the mighty fall. Weber shot a glance at me, his expression a mix of fear and anger, and I could feel the weight of Kavanaugh's words pressing down on us, rearranging the furniture of our minds, causing chaos and confusion. This was no ordinary criminal. He was a master manipulator, a puppeteer who knew how to tug at the strings of our insecurities and fears, making us question our own strength and resolve. I tried to concentrate on the road, to focus on the task at hand, but Kavanaugh's words reverberated through the confines of my mind. I felt trapped, both physically and mentally, as if the walls of the vehicle were closing in around me. Every bump in the road jolted my nerves, and with each passing moment, Kavanaugh's presence became more suffocating. There was no escape, not from him, not from the fear that bound me like chains. Without warning, our vehicle hit a pothole, and I instinctively gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. I glanced back at Kavanaugh, and for a split second, he met my gaze with a ravenous hunger that sent a fresh wave of terror coursing through me. The universe shifted, everything felt wrong. My heart raced, and my instincts screamed at me to keep my guard up, to be ready for whatever he had planned. "Careful there, officer," he chuckled darkly, his voice laced with menace. "Wouldn't want to crash now, would we? That could be unfortunate for you." My fingers trembled as I fought against the urge to lash out at him, to silence his taunts. I was a professional, a protector, entrusted with not only the safety of the people around me, but also with the life of a monster. Suddenly, my radio crackled to life, breaking the thickening tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud. "Base to transport unit, come in," the voice of our commander sliced through the unease that had settled over us. "We're here, base," I responded, my voice steadier than I felt, though the tremor in my hands betrayed my anxiety. "Stay alert. We just received intel about a possible ambush in your area. Keep your eyes peeled and your wits about you." As the weight of the warning settled over us like a heavy blanket, Kavanaugh leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear, sending chills down my spine. "You see? They fear me, even from a distance. What hope do you think you have of stopping me? You're just a cog in the machine, and I'm the one pulling the strings." I forced myself to breathe, the smell of metal and rubber mingling with my rising fear, creating a nauseating cocktail that made it hard to think clearly. Weber looked at me, his eyes wide with panic, and I could see the doubt creeping into his expression. We had to keep it together. The safety of both our lives depended on it, and I couldn't let fear take hold. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, each second dragging on as the dread loomed closer, wrapping its icy fingers around my heart. I anticipated the worst, bracing myself for whatever Kavanaugh had in store for us. He continued with his mind games, recounting tales of his unfortunate luck with guards who had underestimated him, each story dripping with disdain and arrogance. I could see the sinister joy dancing in his eyes, the thrill he derived from our discomfort. And then it happened, a deafening explosion jolted us all. The vehicle shook violently, my ears were filled with the sound of metal grinding, tires screeching as chaos erupted around us. I struggled to maintain control, but the impact threw me forward, and I felt a sharp pain shoot through my shoulder as I braced against the steering wheel, the world around me spinning out of control. Panic erupted within the confined space, the air thick with fear and confusion. "Weber!" I shouted, my voice rising above the chaos, but I couldn't pinpoint him amidst the turmoil. The vehicle came to a halt, and my heart raced as I turned to see Kavanaugh, no longer shackled, grinning like a wolf that had just found its prey. It was a sight that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Time's up," he sneered, his voice dripping with triumph. "Let's see how well you fare without your partner. This is where the fun begins." Weber lay motionless on the floor, a look of shock etched on his face, and my stomach sank as I rushed to check on him, desperation clawing at my throat. But it was clear, he was gone, and the roaring anguish inside my chest was drowned out by Kavanaugh's mocking laughter, a sound that echoed in my ears like a death knell. Such a shame, he taunted, his eyes glinting with sadistic pleasure. You were doing so well. But all it takes is one little bump in the road to send you spiraling into chaos. Look at you now, all alone. I felt rage surge through me, igniting a fire that could not be extinguished. Kavanaugh approached me slowly, every step deliberate, every smile cruel and mocking. What will you do now, officer? You've lost your partner, and now it's just you and me. How does it feel to be so utterly powerless? Seething with anger and desperation, I realized he had no idea how desperate I was to protect those I loved. My family was out there, and the thought of them facing harm because of him fueled me with a determination I didn't know I possessed. I wouldn't let him win. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Kavanaugh lunged at me, but in that moment, instinct took over. I dodged, the world swirling in slow motion as adrenaline coursed through my veins. We wrestled, grappling for control, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. It was enough to give me hope, enough to think I could turn the tide and reclaim my power. But reality came crashing down when he managed to shove me against the wall of the vehicle with a force that knocked the wind out of me. The air was knocked from my lungs, and as he leaned in close, I could see the madness dancing in his eyes, a twisted delight that sent shivers down my spine. You thought you could stop me? You're nothing without your little partner. Just a scared little officer trying to play hero. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I fought back fiercely, channeling every ounce of training and resilience I had learned over the years. I wouldn't let him take me down without a struggle. I remembered the lessons drilled into me about courage and determination, and I harnessed every ounce of strength I had left, fueled by the need to survive. But just as it seemed I had gained the upper hand, he elbowed me sharply, sending pain rippling through my side and causing me to stumble. I lost my focus just for a moment, and that was all it took. In one fluid motion, he slipped past me and darted for the door, a triumphant glint firmly rooted in his stare. Let me out, he bellowed, his voice filled with a manic glee that sent chills down my spine. I rushed to intercept him, but it was too late. The door swung open, and he was gone, vanished into the world where he had once thrived, a world that had shaped him into the monster he was. My heart dropped, and reality hit me like a freight train. I was left in the wreckage, alone and terrified, the dread of failure washing over me like a suffocating wave. Outside, chaos erupted. Sirens blared, the world was a blur of urgency and confusion. Kavanaugh had escaped, and I had lost everything in the blink of an eye. The reality of my situation settled in hard. My family was still out there, my loved ones were at risk, and I had failed to keep them safe from the very monster I was tasked with transporting. I collapsed to the ground, grief overwhelming me. The guilt of Weber's death weighed heavily on my conscience, and the fear for my family clawed at my insides, each feeling weighed heavily like 1,000 chains. I realized then that I wasn't just a pawn, I was a player in a game dictated by a monster who thrived on chaos and fear. And as I sat there, the sirens cutting through the chaos, I vowed that I would find him. This was far from over, and I would not rest until I brought him to justice, no matter the cost. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was supposed to be a weekend filled with adventure and camaraderie, a much-needed escape from the mundane routines of our daily lives. My friends and I had meticulously planned this camping trip to Wisconsin for weeks, our excitement building as we anticipated exploring the great outdoors, sharing stories around the campfire, and basking in the beauty of nature. Little did we know that this trip would plunge us into a nightmare we could never have predicted, a series of events that would haunt us long after we returned home. As we drove deeper into the heart of the Wisconsin wilderness, the landscape transformed dramatically from urban sprawl to dense forests and rolling hills, each turn of the road revealing more of nature's untouched beauty. The trees loomed tall and ancient, their branches intertwining overhead to form a natural cathedral that felt both majestic and foreboding. We arrived at our campsite just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of pine and damp soil, and the sounds of nature enveloped us like a warm blanket, a comforting reminder of the world we were temporarily leaving behind. Setting up the tents was a familiar routine, filled with laughter and playful banter that echoed through the trees. My friends, Jake, Sarah, and Mark, were just as eager as I was to immerse ourselves in the experience, each of us feeling the thrill of adventure coursing through our veins. As darkness fell, we gathered around the campfire, its flickering flames providing a comforting presence against the encroaching night. We roasted marshmallows, shared ghost stories, and listened to the distant calls of owls, feeling a sense of camaraderie that only such adventures could forge, a bond strengthened by our shared experiences in the wild. But as the night deepened, an unsettling fog began to roll in, creeping through the trees like a living entity, slowly enveloping our campsite. It wrapped around us, thick and heavy, obscuring our vision and muffling the sounds of the forest, transforming the familiar into something eerie and strange. The air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over us like a heavy blanket. I glanced at my friends, their faces illuminated by the firelight, and saw that they too felt the shift in the atmosphere, a shared awareness of the darkness that seemed to be closing in. "Maybe we should turn in for the night," Sarah suggested, her voice barely above a whisper, tinged with apprehension. "This fog is getting really thick, and it's starting to feel a bit creepy out here." "Come on, it's just a bit of fog," Jake replied, trying to sound brave, though I could hear the tremor in his voice. "What's a camping trip without a little mystery? It's all part of the experience." But as the words left his mouth, I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of foreboding that settled heavily in my gut. There was something about the fog that felt wrong, as if it was hiding something sinister just beyond our sight. We decided to call it a night, retreating to our tents with an uneasy feeling that we were being watched, our senses heightened by the oppressive atmosphere. Sleep came fitfully, a restless night filled with unsettling dreams and the sounds of the forest distorted by the thick fog. I tossed and turned, unable to shake the feeling of unease that clung to me like a shadow. I could hear the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig, but there was something else, an almost imperceptible whispering that seemed to echo through the night, weaving in and out of my consciousness. I sat up, my heart racing, and strained to listen, but the sounds faded into the background, leaving me in a suffocating silence that pressed in around me. In the morning, the fog had lifted, but the sense of dread lingered like a dark cloud hanging over us. We emerged from our tents to find the campsite eerily quiet, an unsettling absence of the usual sounds of birds chirping and the rustle of small animals that typically filled the air. Instead, we were met with an oppressive stillness that sent a shiver down my spine. I exchanged worried glances with my friends, but we tried to shake off the unease that had settled in our chests. We decided to go for a hike, hoping that the fresh air would clear our minds and lift the weight of the previous night's events. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere shifted again, the air thickening with a palpable tension. The trees seemed to close in around us, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands, grasping at the very air we breathed. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone, that something was lurking just beyond our sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Mark, who had always been the jokester of the group, started to act strangely. He kept looking over his shoulder, his laughter fading as he became increasingly anxious, his usual bravado replaced by a nervous energy that was hard to ignore. "Guys, do you feel that?" he asked, his voice trembling as he glanced around, his eyes wide with fear. "It's like we're being followed. I can't shake this feeling that something is watching us." "Stop it, Mark. You're just trying to scare us," Jake said, attempting to sound dismissive, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing back as if expecting to see something emerge from the shadows. The unease was palpable, a thick fog of anxiety that hung over us as we pressed on, the trail twisting and turning, leading us deeper into the woods, away from the safety of our campsite. Just when we thought we might find our way back, we stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin, its windows shattered and door hanging off its hinges. The sight sent a shiver down my spine, a sense of foreboding washing over me as I took in the decaying structure. "Should we check it out?" Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued, despite the unsettling atmosphere. "Are you crazy?" "That place looks like it's been abandoned for decades," I replied, my voice laced with apprehension, but the others were already moving toward the cabin, drawn by an inexplicable force that I couldn't understand. Against my better judgment, I followed them inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was stale and thick with dust, the remnants of a long-forgotten past hanging in the air like a ghost. As we explored the dark corners of the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line, that we had disturbed something that should have been left undisturbed. Mark found an old journal, its pages yellowed and brittle, and he began to read aloud, his voice echoing in the silence that enveloped us. "The whispers in the woods, they come for you when the fog rolls in. Never stay after dark, for the forest holds secrets that should remain buried." His voice trailed off, and we exchanged nervous glances, the weight of the words hanging in the air like a warning. I felt a chill creep up my spine, a sense of dread pulling in my stomach. We quickly decided to leave the cabin, the oppressive weight of its history pressing down on us, urging us to escape. As night fell again, we returned to our campsite, the fog rolling in once more, thicker than before, wrapping around us like a shroud. The familiar sounds of the forest were replaced by an eerie silence, and we huddled around the campfire, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread that loomed over us like a dark cloud. The fire crackled and popped, but it offered little comfort against the encroaching darkness. That's when things took a turn for the worse. I noticed that Mark had gone quiet, his earlier enthusiasm replaced by a distant look in his eyes, as if he were staring into the fire, but seeing something beyond it. I reached out to touch his shoulder, but he flinched away, his expression twisting in fear. "Mark, are you okay?" I asked, concern flooding my voice as I tried to gauge his state of mind. "They're coming," he whispered, his eyes wide with terror, a look of pure panic etched across his face. "We need to leave. Now. I can feel them, and they're getting closer." Before I could respond, he bolted from the campsite, disappearing into the fog like a wraith. Panic surged through me, and I jumped to my feet, my heart racing. "Mark! Come back!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the thick mist that enveloped us, leaving only silence in its wake. Jake and Sarah exchanged worried glances, and without thinking, we followed after him, calling his name into the darkness that seemed to stretch on forever. The fog enveloped us, making it difficult to see even a few feet ahead, and we stumbled through the underbrush, fear clawing at our throats as we navigated the unfamiliar terrain. "Where did he go?" Jake panted, his breath visible in the cold air, panic creeping into his voice as we continued our frantic search. "I don't know," I shouted back, my heart racing with every passing moment. "We have to find him. He can't be far." But as we searched, the forest seemed to shift around us, the trees looming larger, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock our fear. The whispering returned, echoing through the fog, and I felt a suffocating sense of dread wash over me, a feeling that was almost palpable. It was as if the very woods were alive, watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake that would seal our fate. "Mark!" Sarah called, her voice trembling with fear. "Please, come back. We're here for you." Just when I thought we had lost all hope, I caught a glimpse of movement in the distance. I rushed toward it, my heart pounding in my chest, a flicker of hope igniting within me. "Mark!" I yelled, but as I drew closer, I realized it wasn't him. It was a figure, shrouded in the fog, its features obscured and indistinct. I froze, fear coursing through my veins as I took in the sight before me. The figure turned slowly, and I felt my blood run cold as I met its gaze, dark, hollow eyes that seemed to see right through me, piercing into my very soul. It raised a hand, pointing into the depths of the forest, and I felt an overwhelming urge to run, to escape whatever dark presence lay within the fog. I turned and sprinted back toward the campsite, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I fought against the rising tide of panic. I could hear Jake and Sarah behind me, their footsteps pounding against the ground as they followed my lead. We burst into the clearing, the campfire flickering weakly in the darkness, its light barely pushing back the shadows that surrounded us. "Where's Mark?" Jake shouted, panic evident in his voice as he searched the darkness for any sign of our friend. "I don't know," I gasped, my heart racing as the reality of our situation settled in. He just disappeared. We have to find him." We huddled together, the fire casting long shadows around us, the flickering light offering little comfort. The fog pressed in, thick and suffocating, and the whispering grew louder, wrapping around us like a sinister lullaby, a melody of despair that threatened to consume us. I felt the weight of the forest's secrets pressing down on us, and I knew we were not safe, not anymore. As the night wore on, we tried to stay awake, keeping the fire burning bright, but exhaustion began to take its toll on us. One by one, we succumbed to sleep, our bodies betraying us despite the fear that coursed through our veins. I dreamed of Mark, his face twisted in fear, calling out to us from the depths of the forest, his voice echoing in my mind. I awoke with a start, the fire reduced to embers, and the fog thicker than ever, a heavy blanket that smothered the campsite. "Guys, wake up!" I shouted, shaking them awake, desperation creeping into my voice. "We have to find Mark. We can't leave him out there." We gathered our things, our hearts heavy with dread and fear. The forest felt different now, more oppressive, as if it were closing in around us, the trees looming like sentinels that held secrets we were never meant to uncover. We retraced our steps, calling out Mark's name, but the only response was the echo of our own voices, swallowed by the darkness that surrounded us. Hours passed, and the sun began to rise, casting a pale light through the fog that clung to the trees like a shroud. We stumbled upon the old cabin again, its presence looming ominously in the clearing, a dark reminder of our earlier encounter. Against my better judgment, we decided to check inside once more, hoping to find any clues about Mark's whereabouts, anything that might lead us to him. As we entered, the air felt charged, thick with an unseen presence that sent chills down my spine. The journal lay open on the floor, the pages fluttering as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and began to read the last entry, my voice barely above a whisper. "They come for the lost, drawn by the fog. If you hear the whispers, do not follow. They will lead you to darkness, and you will never return." A chill ran down my spine as I realized the weight of those words, the truth that hung heavy in the air. Mark had followed the whispers, and now he was lost to us, a victim of the very darkness we had sought to explore. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, the gravity of our situation overwhelming me. "We have to find him," Sarah said, her voice breaking as she wiped away a tear. "We can't leave him behind. We owe it to him to keep searching." With renewed determination, we stepped back into the fog, calling out Mark's name once more, our voices echoing through the trees. But the forest felt different now, more alive, as if it were watching us, waiting for us to make our next move, to falter in our resolve. As we wandered deeper into the woods, the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to beckon us forward, urging us to follow them into the depths of darkness. I felt a pull, an urge to follow, but I fought against it, clinging to the memories of our friendship, the bond that had brought us together on this journey. We had to stay together, we had to find Mark and bring him back. Then, just as hope began to fade, we heard a faint cry in the distance. "Mark!" I shouted, racing toward the sound with a renewed sense of urgency. We pushed through the underbrush, our hearts pounding with anticipation, a flicker of hope igniting within us. Finally, we stumbled into a small clearing, and there he was, Mark, standing in the center, his eyes vacant and lost, as if he were trapped in some otherworldly trance. "Mark!" I called, rushing toward him, my heart soaring at the sight of my friend. But as I reached out, he turned, and I was met with a chilling sight. His face was twisted in terror, and he opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out, only silence that hung heavily in the air. Suddenly, the fog thickened around us, and the whispers grew deafening, a cacophony of voices that overwhelmed my senses. I felt a cold hand grip my heart, fear paralyzing me as I stood frozen in place. "Mark, come back!" I yelled, desperation flooding my voice, but he was already retreating, drawn into the depths of the forest, the darkness swallowing him whole. "No!" I screamed, but it was too late. The fog enveloped him, swallowing him whole, and we were left standing in the clearing, our hearts heavy with despair, the weight of loss pressing down on us like a leaden shroud. We stumbled back to the campsite, our minds racing with the horror of what had just happened, the reality of our situation settling heavily upon us. The forest felt alive, pulsing with an energy that was both terrifying and mesmerizing, a reminder of the darkness that lay just beneath the surface. We couldn't stay here any longer. We had to escape, to put as much distance between us and this nightmare as possible. As we packed our things, the fog began to lift, revealing the sun-drenched landscape that felt so foreign after the events of the night. But the beauty of the day felt hollow, a stark contrast to the darkness we had just experienced, a reminder of what we had lost. We made our way back to the car, our hearts heavy with the weight of loss, the memories of our friend lingering in the air like a ghost. The drive home was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts, haunted by the events of the past few days. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stumbled upon something ancient and malevolent, a force that had claimed Mark and would continue to haunt the woods, lurking just beyond the veil of the familiar. It was a darkness that would forever change us, a reminder of the fragility of life and the unknown dangers that lay hidden in the wilderness. As we left the wilderness behind, I glanced back at the trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, a haunting sight that would forever be etched in my memory. I knew that the whispers would linger long after we had gone, a reminder of the darkness that lay just beyond the veil of the familiar, waiting for the next unsuspecting souls to wander too close. This trip was supposed to be a celebration of friendship and adventure, a chance to create lasting memories, but it had turned into a haunting experience that would forever change us. We had faced the unknown and come out on the other side, but the scars of that encounter would remain, a testament to the fragility of life and the darkness that lurks in the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. In the end, I realized that the wilderness held secrets we were never meant to uncover, and sometimes it's better to leave the darkness where it belongs, hidden among the trees, waiting for the next unsuspecting souls to wander too close, unaware of the dangers that lie in wait. All right, that's the end of today's story. Thank you for joining me on this thrilling journey through the shadows of life and death. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the little bell to get more spine-chilling tales from Whisper of Horror. Remember, every soul has a story, and here, we give them a voice. See you next time. Stay curious, stay cautious, and keep whispering horror.